Hey, this is a largely unscripted video to sort of let you all know that I'm still alive. As you may or may not be able to see behind me, my room is definitely not ready yet. The acoustics in this room are god awful, even with the furniture in it, and I'm currently making this with my laptop. And trust me, you can't see it, but the setup I got for my audio equipment right now is borked, to say the least. My more highly edited and scripted videos will return shortly. However, in the meantime, I figured I'd experiment with a more conversational and loosely scripted form of video. The Arks of Omen Detachment came out of nowhere and basically changed the meta of Ninth Edition overnight. It just sort of shadow dropped via a Warhammer community article late in 2022, and with it, everything almost immediately changed. Basically, the way the new Arks of Omen Detachment works is that instead of having detachments that have pre-built compulsory unit types, you get to choose your own compulsory unit type, the type of unit you have to take 3 of, and generally speaking, lists took at least 3 of at least one non-troop unit type to begin with, so this essentially just became just do whatever the hell you want, because lists generally fell under the new rules just kind of incidentally. I've played around 6 or 7 games with the new rulebook, mostly as my custodies, and they changed a lot with the new Arks of Omen Detachment. Custodies used to rely heavily on spamming a few overpowered Forge World units, specifically the Telemon Heavy Dreadnought, and the changes to the game that were made with the Arks of Omen Detachment, along with the balanced data slate that came out with it, almost completely overhauled the strategy of the faction. Before, basically every list looked like, I don't know, 3 minimum squads of Custodian Guard, and then just kind of a bunch of Forge World Dreadnoughts. And this was because nothing else the army had was actually worth taking. I mean, almost nothing had objectives secured. If you weren't playing with any Forge World units, which most people don't, because, I mean, Jesus Christ, have you seen the price of these fucking things? Your only real option in terms of a functional list was basically a bunch of guards that are being buffed by Trajan. That's kind of all you got. The reason for this was because almost nothing in the codex had objectives secured. It was basically just Custodian Guards. This is obviously a change from 8th edition when their elites had objectives secured. But when the new 9th edition codex came out, Alaris Custodians and Custodian Wardens both lost objectives secured, making them not really worth taking, because they just lose the objective to a blob of guardsmen. It's not really worth it, especially in 9th edition where holding objectives is so important. But with the Arks of Omen also came a balanced data slate, which gave Custodian Wardens back their objective secured, which is excellent because they also have a 5-up Feel No Pain, and the lack of actual change to their points cost and the new Arks of Omen changes to detachments meant that Custodian Wardens basically replaced Custodian Guards, and Alaris Terminators, these guys, were actually good again. Both of them were actually worth taking. This meant that Custodes lists became far more dynamic because, well, you didn't just have to spam Custodian guards and tell them on heavy dreadnoughts. There were other units in the Codex that were actually worth taking. The Arks of Omen detachment was largely the catalyst for that change in the Custodes meta. So Custodes got far more dynamic in their gameplay style, but the other army I play, Space Marines, didn't. They really didn't. So for Space Marines, it is important to note that the Arks of Omen detachment made making themed armies both far easier and also far better. So if you're playing White Scars, it's way easier to make a list that's exclusively bikes. If you're playing, I don't know, Salamanders, it's much easier to make a list that is exclusively Flamers. But, here's the thing. The main change that Space Marines got with the new Arks of Omen was with free war gear. People think free war gear is a much more significant buff to Space Marines than it actually is. Space Marines are still at an abysmal win rate, with the lowest win rate army in the game being Death Watch, even though in theory they should benefit the most from the free war gear. Why? Well, because Space Marines didn't just get free war gear, so did Chaos Space Marines, and so did Grey Knights, and so did most armies. Like, honestly, it's really not that special. And people are acting like this one buff, this one change will suddenly overnight make Space Marines overpowered again, but it clearly hasn't, because other factions also got it. And because the Codex Space Marines is just a badly designed codex, the only way it is going to have any kind of success is if other codices are just worse. Just have worse tools. That is it. That is the only way Space Marines are ever meta, because the codex itself is so poorly designed. This is why Space Marines weren't even that much more powerful after they got a universal wound increase, because they also gave that wound increase to Grey Knights and to Chaos Space Marines, and a bunch of other armies got across-the-board stat line increases, like Orcs getting Universal Toughness 5. If you give a buff to everyone, including Space Marines, it's not actually a buff to Space Marines, because Space Marines are such a terrible army by default that they just need to have the best toys. That is the only way that they're ever going to be meta. So, not only did it not work in making Space Marines better as an army, it also made them significantly worse as a faction in terms of just game design. Free war gear is bad game design because it gives binary right and wrong war gear choices. Stern Guard veterans, for example, you wouldn't ever have a Stern Guard veteran just wielding a special issue bolt gun, because the combi weapons are free now. You would never have a guy with a bolt pistol because all of the pistol options are free now. Everything's free now. Everything. So why would you have a guy with the vanilla war gear when the upgrades are free? There's a reason why they're called upgrades. They should cost more points, because then you have a reason not to take the upgrades, because it costs more points. Arks of Omen in general is a great addition to the game, but it's easy to tell that no codex was written with it in mind. just as there were examples like the Adeptus Custodes, where it actually greatly helped the internal balance of a codex, it also threw the internal balance of certain codices completely out of whack. A lot of armies just don't take any of their troops choices anymore, because why would you? The reason why you took them before was because of the quote-unquote troop tax, but that's not a thing anymore because there's no such thing as compulsive unit types anymore, essentially. So you just take an army that's full of just max copies of your best units. That's what most armies are like now, because you don't have any reason not to, because there's no such thing as compulsory units anymore. You just make the compulsory unit type be whatever unit type the best unit in your codex is, and then you take 3 of them. Bam. That's your list. With that being said, though, from a casual perspective, I totally see why this change to the game would be seen as completely and totally positive, because a lot of casual players like making themed armies. They like making, White Scars armies that only use bikes, or they like making tank-only Imperial Guard armies, stuff like that. The Arks of Omen lets you do that. It very much lets you do that. But from a balance perspective, from the perspective of 40k as a game itself, I think we're gonna need to wait until 10th edition to see how good this new style of detachments actually is, because this edition was not made with this detachment system in mind. And it's super easy to tell. Like, some armies barely function anymore, like Dark Eldar, because they lost the ability to take patrol detachments when that was, like, their whole thing. So, we'll have to see how good it is when 10th edition rolls around. It feels like a mechanic from a different edition of the game, because it is. It's most likely just going to be the way detachments are handled in 10th edition. And this is them essentially playtesting the new change in 9th edition, which is fine, in theory, except for the fact that, again, the game wasn't designed with this system in mind, and you can tell that it has massively, massively thrown the game out of whack in terms of its balance. Sometimes for good and sometimes for ill. I can't really complain. Again, I play Custodes, and Custodes are fucking eating with this new edition. They've become one of the best armies in the game, where before they were just kind of mid-tier, and you can run really cool Custodes armies that are basically just waves upon waves of Wardens and Terminators. In fact, that's the list I did run when I was playing with the new Arks of Omen rules. I did basically a big block of Alaris Terminators and several small squads of Wardens throughout the field, and they were obviously buffed by Trajan Valoris. That hasn't changed. Trajan is still an instant take for any Custodes army. But it just... It felt good. It felt good. In a way that Custodes haven't felt this entire edition. Also because Armor of Contempt is gone. Oh my god. Armor of Contempt is gone. Holy shit. This makes Custodes feel so goddamn good now. Because before, with Armor of Contempt, Custodes hit like fucking pool noodles. They didn't do any damage. Because every weapon they had was like AP2, AP3, and so they got destroyed by Armor of Contempt. But now, holy shit, they do so much damage. They do so much goddamn damage. I need you to understand how much fucking damage Castellan axes do. Oh, god damn. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. Custodes are so much fun now. And I love that. I love that, and that's largely because of Arks of Omen. Because beforehand, with the old detachments, you had to take like a battalion detachment, and then you had to take like 3 squads of fucking guards, and their whole point was just to be your troops tax, but that was also like a fucking fourth of your entire goddamn army because it's custodies. But now they have way more freedom in list building. It's no longer so cookie cutter, because before it was like, yeah, you had a few basically must-have units. You had Trajan Valoris, you had Shield Captain on Tawny Gold Jet Bike, and then you had 3 squads of Custodian Guard. This was like the core of your army. No matter what army, or like no matter what you were going to do with the rest of your points, you had to take these 5 units. But this is Custodes. You probably only have like 7 or 8 units at that. So by the time you get done purchasing all of these, you didn't have that many more choices to make. But now, Custodes have actual choices in list building. It's fucking fantastic. I love it so much. It just feels so good. It feels so good now. But at the same time, I can totally see that, like, the game wasn't designed with this, because every other army is like struggling super hard right now, because now everyone's just found out that their faction pretty much has an optimal list. It has the list, because now there's no reason not to take just 3 copies of your best unit and call that your compulsory troop type, or your compulsory unit type, sorry. And for some factions, that is still troops, like Leagues of Votann. I still see a lot of Leagues of Votann lists taking troops as their compulsory unit type, and taking 3 squads of Hearthkin Warriors. But that's because Hearthkin Warriors are nuts. Hearthkin Warriors are insane. Have you seen the Magna Rail Rifle? It's fucking scary. Like, why did they let that be in the game? But that all is beside the point. Do I think Arks of Omen is a good change to the game? I think so. I think, by and large, even just setting aside my uber competitive, super fucking, like, matched play, brain rot mindset over here, I think for 40k as a whole, I think for Warhammer as a whole, Arks of Omen is a good thing. I think it's good for casual players. I think it gives theory crafters over on my side of the aisle a lot more theory crafting to do. In theory, again, most armies just have like a meta, like a single meta list that's just like the list that you do now because of Arks of Omen, but that'll probably change in 10th edition when they actually write the codices with these in mind, you know, like with Arks of Omen in mind. Then I think it'll be a really good system. Or, honestly, maybe they should just get rid of force organization charts completely and just copy Age of Sigmar's War Scroll battalions. They should do that. The more mechanics 40k steals from Age of Sigmar, the better the game will be. That's just how it's going to be. Because Age of Sigmar is a better game.